that's in everything, not just baseball or anything else, that at any moment could be your opportunity, right? If you stay ready, you never have to get ready.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guest today is a former professional baseball player, high performance coach, and founder of The Lab, an elite performance training studio. His speciality is developing and enhancing the performance of elite athletes, and he uses these same principles to coach the general public discover their own inner athlete so they can become the best versions of themselves. In our interview, we dive into the importance of ongoing personal development, why rituals and habits are the keys to success, what everyday athletes should look for in a coach, and how to achieve greater focus and clarity in the face of defeat. So please welcome this week's guest to the Escape Your Limits podcast, Mr. Michael Piercy. Michael Piercy, thank you for joining us at Escape Fitness Now.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
I was going to ask you a question because you've been an athlete playing professionally, and whenever we do these podcasts, sometimes it kind of takes people, they have this kind of nerves for the first part. I guess you could call it almost up until half time. And then they kind of get into it. So for someone who's been under pressure and had to perform from the beginning, what's your kind of lessons about coming straight out of the gate, being ready to go?
I think with being an athlete myself, and then for me, I spend a lot of my time working with athletes. You know, I love to work with youth athletes. I love to work with high school, college guys. It's always the preparation and routine is what helps you. You know, at the end of the day, obviously, I think that if you're not doing, I was always told that if you don't have butterflies, it doesn't mean enough, or, you know, the moment's not big enough. So you should always have that if you don't feel like it's a problem. But the preparation is what takes you to the next level as far as being able to manage that. And that's a lot of what I try to do with, you know, installing with kids, trying to help their mental process, and just with my athletes as a whole.
Do you find some people are naturally, like my son and daughter, they're complete opposites. They do jiu-jitsu competitions, and like she's super nervous, like terribly. And then when she's been in there, she's a different person. And my son's just so cool and hanging out and chatting to people. Is there a right and wrong way, and how do you kind of like use those different nerves and emotions when under pressure?
You know what's funny, and this is great because I've never been able to actually use this in an interview, but Lance Johnson was a great mentor of mine. He was, people who watch baseball will remember him. He was a great hitter. And one thing he used to tell me that, you know, I try to think about a lot with athletes, and especially the great example with your kids is everybody's got a speed that they work at, you know, if it was 1 through 10, right? And then sometimes, you know, if you could find that speed is where you directly need to be. That's the optimal place for you to be, right? So whether I'm nervous or whatever it is, I found like when I played my best, I was probably about at a 7 or a 6. If I was at 9 or 10, I'm moving too fast, I'm all over the place, I'm falling down while I'm trying to field the ball or do whatever. If I'm too relaxed, kind of like where you say your son is, if I'm like at a 1, 2, 3, then I'm just too relaxed. I'm not gauging it. So I think for us as people, and just trying to find who we are, inner athlete or youth athletes, is finding that optimal number to be at, you know. Right. And that just comes from trial and error and just working with it. So it's almost like yourself you've done 1,000 of these, you know. So it's like you at some point you realize where you need to be routine wise, right? Just like a presenter, speaker. If I can understand where I need to be from a routine perspective, I know that number where I need to be, and if I can get myself tuned right there, I feel like I'm prepped and ready to have success at doing something.
And how much of it is about kind of always being ready? Because I was listening to some of your stuff or reading it, and there was an interesting story about when you got, I believe you call it drafted, and the guy came to the thing, and he wasn't actually there looking for you. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you did research for real. You know what? Yep. So it's Dana Brown, who was a scout for me. And he wasn't there to see me. He was actually there to see a teammate of mine. And on that day, I actually had probably one of my best games playing. I had no idea there was a scout there at all. But I think on that day, I had 2 balls I hit to like second base and beat him, hit a ball to the pitcher, and he took too long to beat it to first base. But I think a lot of that goes into preparation and just knowing that at any moment, I think that's in everything, not just baseball or anything else, that at any moment could be your opportunity, right? So just being prepared in every single moment. It's like at my place, we always say this to the younger athletes. It's like, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready.
Right.
It sounds really cliche, right? And it's hard to do because I think we all have moments where we wake up and we just kind of want to get through the day. Mm-hmm. And then you get the corny quotes where you say, and I use a lot of these, it's like it's what can you get from the day, not, trying to get through the day. And it's the hardest thing to manage that mental process. Yeah. And I'm always grateful to the preparation that got me that opportunity. But it's a great story because in that aspect, he wasn't there to see me at all. No. It's a funny story. No, he wasn't there to see me at all. That day I had a great day, and I had family who was there. And my family, they're from New Jersey, so they're aggressive. And they're like, some guy walking around, he was checking all your stuff. And they thought like he worked for the government or something. That guy's checking all of. They're like, did you do something? He works for the government? So I'm like, no. So the next practice we had, it was Dana Brown. He was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He showed up. He said, hey, yeah, I want to see you do, steal times and run a little bit. And ended up getting drafted, and it's a relationship I still have with him to this day. But it's funny. It's a funny story even to both of us because he was definitely there to see somebody else. He wasn't there to see me, but it was a great day.
And it's quite, and from a mindset perspective, it's one that I'd certainly share with my children. It's that probably attitude that somebody trained you at a young age to kind of always be ready, because you could have gone and said, okay, it's no big deal, it's a regular game, mm-hmm. and the direction that you may have gone could have just been, so different.
Yeah.
And how many other people are probably in those day-to-day things where that person's probably there, but you just weren't kind of on your game,
Yeah, I think that is something that, we look at sports as a great metaphor for life, right? And that's why I think that it's tough because we have so much knowledge of what, some of the ramifications of like football and things like that and doing those sports are. But there's also the ramifications of what you don't learn from not participating, right? So some great things I learned. I didn't learn concussions from football, but obviously, you learn great teamwork. You learn that you need to depend on the person next to you, that it's bigger than just you. And then going back to what you hit on, it's just really like understanding that, it's in any given Sunday, Al Pacino always loved this great speech, and he always talks about the inches. An inch here, you don't get there. You don't quite get there. An inch there, you may be too fast or whatever it is. And I think that is great because it's like, what if you missed that phone call? What if I missed a phone call that got me to sit right here with you? What if, you don't answer the phone that day, you don't show up, you decide to sleep in that day? How does that change everything about it, So it's just like you just said, what if I decided, hey, I don't feel like playing that day, or I'm just not going to, give it my all every time I hit a ground ball and things like that. Not that to say that it's the greatest thing for me, but just when you look at in the aspect of everything that we do and what we just been through is what if I'm a great proponent of we never know what people's lives are like when they leave us, right? So people who come into great facilities like this or my facility or anyone around the country, it's like you have people come in, but what if I'm not there on the day that somebody truly needs me to be there, or that kid that needed, just that extra word, what if I'm not there to give it? And it changes the way that we, go about our daily business, I think.
We were talking about business before, and I think it's also an interesting metaphor because a lot of times you're waiting for that big break and that big opportunity and that new product as we were talking about. But I like when you talk about the inches because in a lot of cases it probably isn't that you're probably looking at the wrong thing if that's what you're waiting for. And it's funny, I was in the Uber today thinking about something very similar. And I kind of like this, which is like, look, it's those little inches, it's coming in, it's having the energy. I did a bunch of stuff with Tony Robbins years ago about like your state and your energy whenever you are, and how you have to kind of work just to kind of have that natural energy when you meet someone or whatever you're doing. And I suppose if you kind of if you're not where you need to be on all those things, you're going to get a very different result than if you are, and maybe you meet and have a conversation with someone that you was too tired to do.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned Tony Robbins, and now I'm sitting here. But I'm like, Tony Robbins, and now you got me here, which is completely a downgrade, I think. No, I'm joking.
No, I don't think so.
Tony Robbins had one great quote that I love from him, and he said, people don't lack resources, they usually lack resourcefulness. And I think that when you talk about inches, it's what can you do on a daily basis? I know obviously we talk baseball, right? We all want to hit a home run. We all want to have the great product, we all want to have, we would love to open the doors and have lines around the corner, but it doesn't always happen like that. It's sometimes when you're just hitting singles, you just hit singles and then you move the runner, eventually you're going to score if you hit enough singles, right? And it's easy to say, but it's not always easy to do. Sometimes it's in the practice of it that's tough, because you got to take some hits to usually get some hits. And that's one of the things we see with COVID, right? So I think that's a really cool way of looking at it from the preparation standpoint. But when we talk about inches, that's everything.
And with baseball's an interesting sport. It's not something I know a lot about. It's very American.
Uh-oh.
I think our equivalent is probably cricket, maybe. But I guess you're right. When you think of the little I know about baseball, is I suppose it in terms of strategy, and is it that you have the singles, that as opposed to trying to get that home run? Is it a lot about, okay, look, I'll make a small step, and eventually, we're all around.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because it's like, all right, so it's even if you think about baseball, but if we went to something that's totally global like soccer, right? You don't just have one guy run straight down the soccer field trying to kick the ball into the goal. You're going to have to kick to this guy. It's the one thing it's maddening for me when I try to watch it and understand it. I'm like, well, if I was running around, I'd just be trying to kick the ball in the goal. But you got to use all of these teammates, and it moves a little bit. Football, it's trying to get a first down, and you don't always get this huge play, which I know that you don't. Football for you guys, you like to call.
Yeah, we
like
call
to
it
say
football.
American football.
And American football is even slower, isn't it? You kind of move. You do move inches, don't you? You seem to, and then there's a commercial, and then you move a few inches. And
you gotta have the commercial. Come on, man. You gotta have the commercial. That's what all the pauses are about. So we can just slip in more commercials on you. We got some express commercials, some escape commercials. We got a little bit of everything commercials. Yeah, so it's about moving the needle just slowly. Somebody like yourself who's, done huge things, creating a big company. It's like, you would love to have open the first day and have everything you want, and then, hey, that's it. It's plug and play, but it almost never is like that. So you gotta, that's why I think that entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, and that's okay. It's not, it's just like, being a professional athlete's not for everybody. Being an amazing public speaker is not for everybody. There's steps, unfortunately. What's the great quote they say, the elevator to success is broken, you got to take the stairs, So when you look at it, it's step by step. But it's the people who can manage those steps, and I think that when you think of the athletic background, I think it's a great metaphor for that, because baseball is not a sport where you're not going to hit the ball 100% of the time. It's a failure sport. So if you are
it's a high percentage as well, isn't it, apparently? I don't know.
70% failure rate, right? If you hit the ball 30% of the time, you make the Hall of Fame.
Really? 30%?
Yeah, 30.
Hall of Fame.
You hit 300, right? So you think of the great,
Oh, okay.
And it's one of those things that it becomes interesting. You hit 300, you're a superstar,
So then the average person is going to be even less then, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you like, 10%? Are you?
I usually tell the kids if I was that great at that, I wouldn't have this job. So, so it's all good. But yeah.
So is that right? So in baseball, then you would probably be, if you're good, you're probably hitting it 10% of the time.
You're 30%. You're 300. You're a 300 hitter. You're great. Or one of those guys that hits 50 bombs. 50 home runs. You make a lot of money too. But I take that in, a lot of times when people discuss athletics, and it's almost like I had two different lives, right? Because it's so far from this one, but it's not in a respect that a lot of those lessons are what I utilize every day. When you think about that, it's the same percentages when you think about putting out your marketing, right? So you might have 70 things that you do, and 30% of them work, or 70% of the ads that you put out might bring in whatever it is, but 30% of them become what it is. I look at like that 80-20 rule mostly, which is even more crazy, but it's like 20% of the things that you do will lead to 80% of your results, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting when we really try to extrapolate it. But it's sports driven. My pops passed in 2019, right? And when you lose somebody that you love, you really, I think that one of the offshoots of that is a lot of things that they say, it resonates differently. And the one thing that I was basically brought up on baseball. And the one thing that he would say is, the baseball players, your main goal is to stay on the line. All right, so there's a line that goes across this imaginary line. And the key is when you're up and people tell you you're great, don't believe them. And when you're down and people tell you suck, don't believe them. Stay on the line no matter what happens. You stay even, and that's where you stay, And I think that we call that humbleness, right? But for me, I look at it, and that's really just trying to stay on that line, no matter what you do, And I think that's for me, that's something that resonates with me on a daily basis.
So what I'd like to talk about then is one of the things that I guess is your passion and your business now is finding the best version of yourself, or finding the inner athlete in people, and whether you are an athlete or whether you're a regular person that's probably not worked out most of your life and decides that they want to go and find that person. So what to you, and in terms of when you're coaching people, what would you say it means to be able to find the best version of yourself?
You know what, I think you hit on it a little bit. There's this thing with athletes, right? And I think that the majority of people that will walk into a great place like the places that we have, they think that they're not athletes. And we're all athletes. If you just release some mice and whatever it is in here, people would get real athletic trying to get away from whatever it is. Or you would get real athletic, and it's a morbid way to think if you needed to grab your son or daughter out of the street from a car that was speeding towards them or whatever, people would get more athletic. So I think everybody's an athlete, just everybody's not a professional athlete. That's a whole nother level. So when you think about trying to find the best version of yourself, I always look at it as how can we find a way to get 1% better today than we were before. And that could mean a lot of things. It sounds like cliche is the word of the day, right? It sounds cliche, but can I help a person get better at doing, maybe they couldn't do a box jump, or maybe they couldn't do, a dead bug before, maybe they couldn't do a broad jump and stuff like that. What we try to do in that place is we try to really take something that a lot of people find as a really tedious activity and try to add some infusion of fun to it. And if I can get you to become or feel like you can do the things that you see your favorite athlete do, that's one of the best compliments I would get from a person that's what I would call an everyday athlete, is they would come in and they would watch an ESPN Plus documentary, and they would say, oh, I saw LeBron James and he was doing the same exercise that I was doing, but all of a sudden that adds a different level of excitement because I'm looking at the exercise differently from a mental aspect. And I'm viewing myself in the same type of cascade as that athlete. And that changes the way you think about it, other than, I think that we're both like lifers in the industry, right? So people used to think like fitness is this huge chasm, right? Where they stand on this side and then fitness is over here. And the only way I could get there is to ride the treadmill to get there, basically. For us is to try to really ignite the fact that there's many different ways that you could get there. And we're an athletic place. We're a place for athletes. So we want to have that same level of training, but we want to be able to give it to you in a way that you can advance your skill level, if that makes any sense. So we want people to come in and be able to advance your skill level. And as you do that, you start framing a better version of yourself because you're becoming better physically, but also from, it's that self-efficacy thing that we talk about in courses and stuff like that, where people start to feel like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can do these things. And then the next thing, seemingly impossible task I give you that you think I'm a crazy nut job for giving it to you, you may be a little game for doing it, as opposed to saying, I just can't do that. So that's kind of where I like to say I think about that a little bit.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview. One of the things that I've found through a lot of the people I've interviewed in the podcast is it all starts in the mind, in the head. And my guess is probably similar to athletes that go on to be something, they've got this big why driving them. If you take that down to, I guess, a regular person, not an athlete, but someone who wants to get fit and wants to be an athlete, how do you sort of get them to, or can you get them to find that why that will get them to probably do the things that they may naturally find uncomfortable or difficult or challenging to pursue for an extended period of time? Or is that something that they just have to figure out themselves, would you say?
I think it depends a little bit on the environment. I think a lot of it's the environment. If I'm in a one-on-one setting, I get a chance to really get in touch with what Matt's got going on, and we get the chance to talk, and I can guide that conversation. In a group atmosphere, I think that if you're running a group atmosphere, I think it's more you creating the right environment. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can look from an athletic aspect, right? If you've ever been on great teams, it's a difference in what the feeling is in those great teams than it is on those teams where it might not have been a bad team. And it doesn't have to always be a bad team, it's just not a connection, you know. On great teams where we won championships or where you still talk to those guys and it's interesting, there's this, I think, I usually call it, I didn't create it, but it's called kind of like this suffering breeds cohesion type of thing, right? So I think you see it in a lot of formats. We have hit formats where people get into a space where they can suffer together, but it also creates this kind of mental connective tissue where people feel like I'm in a comfortable, safe place. I think that from a group aspect, that changes differently. I think that in a one-on-one aspect, we can talk a lot more about whys, or I have to become more like, you know, like Matt with the interview, right? I have to ask the right questions. I think in a group atmosphere, it's more like creating the right environment. And that's what I really want to do, is that's what the whole goal is. That's my why when it comes to, you know, everyday athletes or your regular athletes, because it's like we talked about before the cameras went on, and you just never know where people are coming from. That's the one lesson I think that I would tell people. It's one of the lessons that I learned from the COVID shutdowns and things like that. And not only that, but just what I've just gone through with flooding and having so many people, you know, like Escape and like the many different brands that came out to really help, and people in the industry, is that you just never know the impact that you have on people as they go out into the world to take on this game of life like everybody else, right? And for us, if I don't get a chance to talk to people in a 10-person, you know, class, I might not get a chance to connect with everybody else, but I just don't know. What's the quote? People won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? Right, yeah. So I think that's where we can contact that a little bit in a roundabout way. Creating a really great environment for people to where they can get in touch with. We might not necessarily know the why, but they're in a place where that why is intact, if it makes sense.
So let's focus on the coach for a moment, because obviously you've had a lot of experiences working with coaches. My guess in professional sport, that's a big part of the team. But if you think about it in terms of the fitness space, you know, look at the fitness industry. There's kind of a lot of places where you go for fitness where they don't have any coaches. You just kind of go in and do it on your own, and then places like you have where there's a lot of coaching one-on-one and groups. What is a couple of things in how should someone who's trying to get the results, what should they look for in a coach? Because I suppose in when you talk about these teams and this energy, obviously there were certain people who were very good at it. Mm-hmm. But then on the other side, if you're that coach, how should you approach the responsibility of that role? Is it a case of you just need to understand about how to do the exercises and whatever, or is it is being a good coach that's going to actually get people to do amazing things a lot more than just understanding the technical parts of it? So I'm trying to, there's a lot to sort of unpack there, but the two sides, someone who's looking for one and then someone who's thinking of being one.
You know, and like you said, this is a two-part question. It's interesting. I think I say this a lot. Like when I first came into the industry, it was really about, I think when we looked at like training in general, it was really about you got to learn the right form or you're going to get hurt. And that stuff is it's still important. But I think that nowadays we have more information available to us than we've ever had, right? And if I could write down a group of exercises and say, hey, Matt, go do these, you could do them. You know, you don't hire a coach for that anymore, I don't think. I think when I look at it is, can I push you to places that you wouldn't go on your own? I think that's a yes. That's what you do with athletes. I think that's the different. I remember just looking at kind of the pandemic and COVID and people being so nervous because all of these people are entering the space. But I just think there's no substitute for a great coach. I mean, great coaching, when we talked about it, I think the trust level is huge. I think that's what it is. You hire a coach because it's somebody you can trust, you know. They might have all the certifications up the wazoo. They might have, you know, everything, but at the end of the day, it's just something about them and you that doesn't click. And for me, I've always been open to that. I think that people should work with people that, you know, really can push them in a way that's constructive and positive and productive. But if it's not really working, athlete or so on, I think that you have to find somebody that can take you there. I remember, and this is a conversation I had with one of the guys that I knew here earlier today when, you know, before we were setting up. And it's even with athletes, you might get to a certain point, and you see this with fighters, where I can no longer take you where you want to go. My level of knowledge and expertise has hit its cap. And I can no longer take you where you need to go. And that's okay. That's got to be okay. Because for us, when we look at in regular coaching, if we're working with everyday athletes, you might hit a certain point where if I'm not a registered dietitian, and you might have something that's just completely that you need somebody, my level of knowledge has terminated at that point. Mm-hmm. And you need to find somebody, I need to help you find the right situation at that point. Doesn't mean that the relationship has to not coexist. So I think that, and I'm kind of going far afield, but I think that if you're looking for a coach, I think that's what, first and foremost, you want somebody that's going to help you get to where you're going in a more efficient manner than you would get there yourself. So when I look at a lot of the tech, a lot of it's cool, and I think that there is a lot of information. But at the end, I think that in every journey, you get to a point where you need, I always lean on the one quote where it says, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that's happened for me in my whole entire life. And I really think that if you're open to that, I think that that happens for everybody, and no matter what walk of life. For me, it's been throughout this industry, I've always hit a space where at some point, the level of where I can go on my own has terminated, and I've had somebody to help you kind of go a little bit further. And then there's somebody who can help you with this situation if you're open and available to it. Mm. And I think that that's where the other side comes in from the client and athlete side, is I have to really be open to that. And I think that they call it, we call that the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, right? Where you talk about the stages of change and you have a person who's just not at the stage where they really want to do anything. Then it's a wash. You could be, you know, Vince Lombardi, you're not going to help that person. You know, he's like, I don't even know who Vince Lombardi is.
I do, yeah.
I know, I'm just messing with you, because I know you're international. So I gotta get somebody from where you're from.
I learned it from Tony Robbins, actually. But
all right, let's go Tony. We're going Tony. So we go Tony. So you could be Tony Robbins, and I don't know. I've seen Tony. He's not bad at all. He might be able to, but if you're not ready for that, it's hard for you to get. My all-time favorite coach is Jim Valvano.
Right, I don't
and
know.
he was, Well, he has a great cancer foundation now, but NC State, great basketball team, no NBA athletes on the team. He was able to beat this five slammer jammer team who had basically almost 5 Hall of Famers on it. But the reason why is, and he was a little bit before my time, I was probably about 10 years old maybe when he won, or a little younger than that. But the reason why is like watching documentaries. I always love to watch documentaries about great coaches because it's always, I think that you never take on all the knowledge or something, but wherever you are in life, there's always one little nugget in something that might speak to where you are. And for him, when working with the athletes, I don't know how familiar you are with the NCAA basketball tournament, but one of the traditions is when they would win a national championship, they cut the nets down.
Right. Okay.
So he would have one practice every year where they wouldn't do any basketball. They would just come in and cut the nets down. And they would pretend like that they won a national championship and do all these things. So during that whole run where they were winning, they were down in every single game. But somehow, some belief, it's just we've been here before. So in one, there's a 30 for 30. I always tell everybody it's worth the hour to watch it. But it's just one thing that resonates with me. And they were up in one game, and then one of the guys that was one of the main players, he says, we got into the familiar place where we were down, and all of a sudden that snapped them right back to where they are because it's the familiar place of we've been here before. Now we can win this, Right. And I think that, not to go too far afield, I think with coaching, it's a style thing, but from an athlete-client standpoint, they have to be open to that. And then when those two things match up, you can make magic, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's really where you look at that.
Yeah, it's definitely something it's definitely a unique skill, and I suppose it's something that you have to work on a lot. But I also heard an interview with you where you said something around like kids, the kids being coachable or uncoachable, and kind of whether they're unemployable, which I guess you could look at other ways as well. But I suppose, which I didn't realize, is you have to, as a person, be coachable. Even though you could have a great coach, if you're not open to that, then you're not going to get anywhere, I guess.
No, the funny thing is I can't remember what interview that's from, but you're like the third person that said I said that. So I'm like thinking of it, but
I think it was something like if you're uncoachable, you're unemployable.
Yeah. Uncoachable kids become unemployable adults.
Yeah.
And that, for me, in our place, that's the one thing I think that if you said, what do we do? I always tell people, hey, you can take all the Goliaths you want. It's like a Bible thing. I'm a faith guy. So you can take all the Goliaths, I'll take all the Davids. I'll take all the kids that you said were too slow. I'll take all the kids that you said were too short, all the kids that you said were too fat. And for me, because it's a mindset thing, I love underdogs. For me, I feel like I'm an underdog. I came from a place where nobody was drafted and stuff like that. The day I told my mom I was getting drafted, she didn't know what draft meant. She's like, draft. She's like, make sure you take out the garbage after y'all get done drafting. So it was like something that was like not something that we would go through every day. It was unique. But when I go back to that quote, it's really a mindset thing, and it's not a defeatist attitude that, you're going to have a small percentage that go on to be professional athletes. But it's a way that you do things. And I think that when I look at it, I always went through my career. I didn't get to play, the 20 years in the big leagues that some people got. But I have zero regret because I feel like if I try to train kids to understand that if I shoot every missile at the aircraft carrier and it don't go down, I gave you everything I got, and at the end I could live with the result, whatever that may be. So I get my most joy from them. So a lot of times on social media, you won't see some of the, the college guys or things like that. I like to show the young kids because that's their development, right? You can watch them grow, you can watch them get different, but you'll also watch them grow here because now they handle defeat different. They handle success different. It's not always the way you handle defeat, right? A lot of times it's the way that you handle success. And I remember having a parent come in, great gentleman, and I've trained his son for years, since he was maybe 10. And I remember him coming and saying, well, they have a showcase for kids, and he's gonna run and do stuff like that, and I want to get him ready for that. And I said, you know what? maybe the worst thing is not that he goes and he doesn't do well. I said, maybe the worst thing is that he goes and he's the number one guy, because then how does that impact you? Because does it change the way that you train, how hard you work when you come in? So sometimes it's better that I'm a former athlete. I don't do any baseball training. That's by intention. I don't do any technically specific stuff for a reason, because I want any youth athlete, high school, college, when they come and hit the doors of the lab where I'm at, if I'm yelling at you, it's not because you didn't get a hit. It's not because you didn't get the bunt down. It's not because you didn't, score the touchdown. It's not because of anything. It's because of, it's what genuinely your effort, and it's what you need in that moment. I feel you need in that moment to help you reach the next level, to be the teacher that you need in that moment. I always wanted it to be a love-based place and an organic place where they could come. Is if, we just talked about that coaching-wise and that why. If you ever needed to tell somebody something that you felt like you couldn't tell anybody else in the world, I want them to hit the door and feel like that's the place where they could tell people. You feel safe when you walk through the doors. And that's always been the reasoning for everything. So we don't, I don't ever want kids that, go about and behave in a way that, is embarrassing to them in their upbringing. So when we look at uncoachable, I want, kids that you feel like are coachable. They take, responsibility for the mistakes, but they're genuinely giving you everything that they have. And if it's not there, it's because it's not there in that moment. But we're going to continuously try to get better, and we do that together. And that's really what I mean by that quote. It's really one of those things, and that's why I say I'll take all the Davids, because it's just like, hey, because there's some greatness there, and I want to be the one that uncovers it for them or helps them get to it. But that's kind of where that comes from.
So how do you coach around defeat? Because I suppose if and you've probably been through quite a bit of this recently, having your gym flooded up to 3 feet and thinking, what the hell are you going to do? But also we've been through, or people in this space have been through COVID, and people who have not had businesses but have been at home have had all kinds of things to deal with mentally, questioning what they're doing and where they're at. It's been a pretty tough period for people, regardless of their situation. So how, as a coach, what role have you been able to play, and how do you coach people when they're going through that, I suppose that dark space, and compare it to athletes which probably have been on a losing streak, and they're also questioning themselves and their ability. Is there some things that coaches can do to sort of help change those periods that probably aren't fantastic?
I think it's interesting. There's a quote that immediately it's like the reason why you hear some things in the past is they come up in the future. And I think that sometimes it's a weird thing. It's one of those things where you might say something to me now that 10 years from now might completely help me in a situation, and you were supposed to say it to me then so I could hear it then. I'll try to tie it up so it makes sense. I've always been told, and we think about, I wasn't always like this. So I try to coach athletes past a lot of my mistakes. But one of the things that coaches used to tell, I had a great coach, Ray Taylor, and he used to tell me this all the time, and my father as well. He used to say, Mike, you can afford to be poor in your circumstances. You can never afford to be poor in your attitude. And it's always stayed with me, because you can deal with a bunch of different circumstances, and you can't learn, unfortunately, you don't learn a lot from success, right? It's like if you just came in, you started this great company, and everybody sold out of every piece of equipment, and when you actually, when we think about the pandemic, I always think about the people who were really just having hand-over-hand success, and I feel bad for them, because like all of a sudden you're in a space that you're completely unfamiliar with. But if you've dealt with defeat, and I always had a coach always say, keep a personal highlight reel in your head. If you keep a personal highlight reel, it's almost like the Jim Valvano story. It's like you get into that comfortable spot where you're down, but that you've survived 100% of those circumstances in your life. You know what I mean? So you could do a lot of different things, but you can't do a lot of them if you decide to get down. When we talk about the flood, the one thing it's like, not to be corny and cliche about it, is when I did the video, I was telling you, I didn't do the video to have like this swelling of people, which I'm so grateful for. Like, I just did it because you wouldn't actually believe it unless you could actually see what you were looking at, right? But in that moment, it's a tough moment because you don't really know what you're doing, right? For me at that moment, standing in 3 feet of water, only thing I could think of is like, I can't stand in 3 feet of water anymore. I gotta actually get out of here, right? But in my house growing up, basically, it was, you could always, and this is baseball, anything else, it's like, listen, we got one day to really just be, we got one day to be woe is me, then we got to figure out a plan. We don't have 2 days, we don't have 3 days. Now we got to pick it up and figure out what the next step is. So I think that was my attitude, and it's not, to tell people, that's just kind of how I played it. And the thing is, I think when we think of defeat, no matter what circumstance we're in, especially me, I mean, we're blessed people, So at the end of the day, it's a lot of people in the world that'll trade places with me in a heartbeat. And they take my problems and they do a lot,
You said that to me when I came in, we first met. I'm like, well, how do you feel about it? I was imagining you'd be like, devastated. And you was like, well, I imagine a lot of people would trade a place with me. And it kind of, that sunk in,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe that phone call I just had wasn't that bad.
You know what? And that you hit on that is so amazing because once again, I remember being in the flood and I was there and I had one of my guys that was 12 years with the Giants, played professionally, and he called me on the phone and he said, he sent me a text because I had been checking on him throughout the time and his mom had passed, and I go through 70 floods to have, my dad back or not have to, ever bury, a person that you love. So when you look at it, it puts it in perspective a little bit. But when we look at it, we're blessed people, man. If I could deal with the good things that happen to me, like being able to sit here with you, being able to have all these people that, pretty much stood up for me in this whole situation. If I could deal with all those blessings, I could deal with the things the poor circumstances that come with it. And it's not always easy to do. It sounds good rolling off the tongue. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think that's the way I look at it. If I could deal with the great things that happen, and for me, I can recount many, then you're gonna have to deal with a little bit of the rain. You can't curse the rain because then you wouldn't appreciate the sunshine, right? Yeah. So I always think that, if it's a lot of rain, some sun's going to come at some point.
Are these rituals that you've developed or teams develop, like we're talking about the sort of athlete mindset, and are these rituals that you kind of have every day, like the highlight reel? I quite like that idea. I've never done that, but it's like, yeah, okay, let's create one first, and then now let's play it back. But have you found in sort of top athletes or even yourself, or including yourself, have you got rituals that you find kind of just keep you in that, like you said, that sort of middle ground that your father talked about?
Yeah, it goes back to that number, right? So with rituals, I think that it's individual, and I try to give that to each athlete. Your ritual, some people's rituals are nuts. If you watch tennis, I forgot who it is. You got somebody that doesn't wear the same shoe, or they put the shoe on the same. I remember reading something from Michael Jordan's trainer, and he had a ritual where he's got a brand new pair of sneakers. Obviously, he's Michael Jordan, but he has the laceless sneakers. That's part of his ritual. It's part of his mental ritual. He has the lace up. He has to put the laces in. So his trainer says that one day he wanted to save him some time, and so he laced the sneakers up. First thing he does, he comes in and sees the laced up sneakers. He takes the brand new sneakers, chucks them in the trash, and then pulls out a brand new box and starts lacing them up, because that's his thing. There was a guy, Wade Boggs, who used to play for years, 300 hitter, Hall of Fame guy, and he used to eat chicken every day. He had to eat chicken every day, and it's interesting. Baseball players, the king of rituals, because if you get 3-4 hits and you ate 20 chicken nuggets that day, you'll eat 20 chicken nuggets the rest of your life every day. But that's because people will say, it's like I eat salmon for lunch almost every single day from the place that's next door to me, and they're like, "Do you ever switch?" I'm like, "No, I'm kind of baseballish. Once you get something you like, and you just kind of stick with it. If I find a shirt that I like, I buy it in every single color. If I find a pair of sneakers."
Is that more superstitious than I suppose? Are those rituals that are there rituals that kind of like serve you, which, okay, yeah, I'm reinforcing, or maybe it does, I don't know, I've never been there, but are some that kind of reinforce out those memories or those ideas or those thought patterns, or are there some that are just a bit obsessive and don't actually, I don't know, the shoelace thing, as great as he is, it sounds a bit...
You know what? There's a mental thing, I think, that it comes into that frame of mind, and you never know what's going on in that moment where he's lacing. Are you thinking about things?
Yeah,
it's
right.
a process-driven act. For us, when you watch it from the outside, we think it's nuts.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to think of the tennis player who does all the, you know, the stuff. It's the King of Clay guy. So I can't remember his name. I'm gonna remember later on, and wish I, you know, hopefully he doesn't watch the interview. He's like, this guy doesn't know my name. But for us, it's maddening because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a process-driven thing, because if I can replicate the process, like we're business people, right? McDonald's is great because they do a couple things really well, but one thing they do really well is they make it so that your Big Mac, if you have a Big Mac in China, it tastes exactly the same as the one out here that's down the street or whatever it is. And it's a process-driven act, right? Some of it might play into it. Some of it might just be because the way I did it forever or whatever. I think from an athletic standpoint or even life standpoint, it's like if you have a planner that you write in every day with a specific pen, it just puts you in a frame of mind to feel like that, you know, those great days, I can replicate that, you know, by creating this process. Or if you drink that same a cup of coffee from the same place at the same time every day, it's a process-driven act. Now, some of it, yeah, you might just be like, hey, you know, but somebody ruins that routine, it changes the way that you view the day a little bit.
Right.
Because what happens is like, this is the maddening part about it, right? Is if you had that same cup of coffee from that same Starbucks at 7, this guy who jumped in front of you in line, all of a sudden, if somebody goes and dings your car, you assume it's because of whatever happened and the process didn't go the way it was supposed to go. And that's the way athletes think a little bit. We think like, oh man, I struck out twice today, but you know, they only had 18 chicken nuggets, you know, so that's what happened. So I don't know. I think it's more mental, because what happens is along the way, we don't know, you know, the mental process is setting you up for what you felt like always happened. I got to go with Michael Jordan. He was able to replicate a lot of the greatness, right? Yeah. But if you watch some of the other great athletes, like Steph Curry, with the crazy, wild, you know, if you watch him with the dribbling and the shooting and things he does every single time, from the tunnel jump shot he does, to I'm a Cowboys fan. You watch, you know, Dak Prescott, the quarterback, and he does this hip thing that people will all make fun of now. But that's part of the process to delivering and replicating, you know, the
that
success.
Consistency, yeah.
Yeah, because once I found the pitfalls, I kind of want to stay in what it is. And if, I think it's that
groove.
Yeah, I think it, as an athlete, it also provides you a sense of comfort.
Right.
Because that gets me to the number that I want to be at.
Okay.
You know, and that's, I think, later in the career. I had an old, a veteran, I won't say old, veteran player tell me that when I first started in the pros, and he said, by the time you learn to play this game, you won't be able to play it anymore. And it's funny because you do. You learn a lot as you get older, and all of a sudden now you have this book of knowledge, and that's kind of why I coach, because you can give these little nuances. Because if you don't have the routine, it's kind of happenstance, what you go into every day.
So you have to really create good habits, I suppose, as well, don't you? You have to train those good habits into you, doing the repetitive stuff.
Yeah, I think we all do it. I mean, you've done 1,000 of these with amazing people, right? And you're gonna have some butterflies when you come in and sit down across from Tony Robbins, or you sit down from across from, you know, a lot of the really great people that you have on the show. And you got a process that you get in that allows you to do the research, how you do it, what are your talking points and things like that. That makes you great at what you do, right? And I think that we all have, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, that process that we replicate. And I mean, that's what I try to do now as far as training athletes. Is I try to get involved with what mentally do we need to work with, and then how can I get them prepared, you know, to deal with whatever the rigors are of that. Because I think, I don't know, we're at a point in our athletic society and just society in general where mental health is really recognized. So it's a different place to navigate from how you deal with certain things, whether you agree with some of the ways that athletes deal with it or not. The processes, I think, can help you, you know, deal with that in a way that all of a sudden, you know, you don't come apart.
Yeah.
Or you are able to surmount some of the obstacles.
Yeah.
So,
Because it must be, I suppose it must be difficult because you're really, I suppose, stressing everything physically, mentally, and so, when those things don't go to plan, it's probably it's a lot more difficult than what most people have to deal with, because, and then you've got not just yourself, but the pressure from fans and family and people who are that's a hell of a lot. It's very tough, I can imagine. And I know it's not to say they don't get, athletes, that they don't get paid in other ways, but there's only a few of them that actually get to that level. The pressure's there all the way up, my guess.
Yeah, the thing is, and it's a loaded topic because you're going to have people that come from all sides. I think that when we were coming through as athletes, you didn't have as much of knowledge about it. But it's like you said, it's how does that, when I look at it, I just look at it and I try to say, how does that affect the kid who strikes out in the Little League World Series? How does it affect him at that age? How does it affect, the college athlete who, just threw the interception that lost the national championship? How do we prepare them? What do you prepare them for in that aspect? And I think that starts from, I talk a lot about the younger ones, but I think it starts there. You build the foundation of understanding that, along the road, I did do a lot of great things, and how do we deal with that? We talk about that highlight reel again, but also once you hit on a really key thing, it's like you're doing this on the world stage, and we could talk about the world stage, but it's bigger than it's ever been, right? Because
in social media
in itself, and then not only that, but people have platforms that not all the time we feel like they should have, but all of a sudden I get to say, hey, Mike, you suck. And then I know that you told me I suck. In the past, it's like you might walk into a visiting stadium, right? And then the guy just says, hey, you suck. And it's like, yeah, have another beer. Yeah. But it's not pervasive to where I'm sitting at home at night and now I can scroll through, highlights. And so I still think as a society, we're trying to figure out what the right way to deal with that is. So I applaud some of the athletes for how they've handled it. But
are they trained in dealing with that? Because as you say, some of the bigger ones, you're getting that direct feedback of everything. It's however strong you are mentally, having that. When you've made a mistake, you kind of know it yourself, and then you have people that are creating these whole stories and explanations around it. And
I laugh because it's funny when I was playing, and when I was playing, I don't think it was that long ago, but it wasn't like social media the way it is now. You might have had some other platforms, but you didn't have Twitter and everything where people would go back and forth on things. And then it wasn't, the minor leagues is one, but when you go up another level, I think that it's completely, craziness. But I always remember, I'm a huge football fan, but playing baseball, I'm always like, I can't stand these crazy fans, But then I would go home in the offseason and I would become that crazy fan on football, right? And then I'm watching and I'm like, this guy sucks. And then I stop and say, he doesn't suck. That guy's one of the best players in the world at kicking, otherwise he wouldn't be there. You got to stop yourself. But nowadays, I think that, it's having that platform to disseminate this type of stuff, and then the athlete has to actually deal with that. And I don't know if we do have the right structure in place yet, because I don't think we know enough about. I think we're learning. I think we're learning as coaches, and I think as coaches we can try to. I think the best thing we could do is equip ourselves with a better toolbox of understanding how to deal with this new world of social and things, because now it's like if you're in high school, you're subject to that type of.
It happens on all levels, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're subject to a beatdown if you miss a social media beatdown if you miss the shot in the state championship, or from not just kids, from grown adults. It's insane. But we look at it, that's the maddening part for me, but I think that we haven't found a way to combat that from providing the athletes with the tools that they need as of yet. I'm hoping that in the future we will, and the more things that come out, we've started to really recognize this as a challenge. But I think that as coaches, for us to help the athletes that we have, we need to get better at it. And then a lot of it's changing attitudes, So, but I hate to be the crotchety old guy sometimes for them, but sometimes we feel like they should push through things that, maybe we don't fully understand, the scope of what they're trying to go through. So for me, I've pulled back a lot on that. Is, what can we work through and what it really, you need some help to tackle it. And I think it's a loaded thing that you could spend a whole podcast talking about with really, smart people to try to figure out what the next steps in that is. But I think that as coaches, it's something that we need to really educate ourselves on, so that we can really equip the athletes that we work with, so that they can be their best, but also, it's got to be more solutions than just turn off social media. So I think.
So what about burnout? Like that, my guess is that that's quite connected, in terms of how you deal with some of these situations and maybe what causes you to get into them as well in certain cases. So can you, like, whether it's a mental burnout, and I'm talking athletes, but then also regular people, mental burnout, physical burnout, just probably not getting that kind of recovery that is required, whether it's, trying to do a sport and work and do your family. Like, how do you, what's your views on kind of spotting it, dealing with it, and managing potential burnout or fatigue, which can, I suppose, sort of lead into other things in your life that may not be ideal?
The funny thing, Matt, I'm gonna tell you the truth, I'm the world's biggest burnout hypocrite because I'll work from 6 to 9 every single day and then not take breaks and do stuff like that, but at the same time tell athletes exactly what you just told me about recovery and everything. So I've gotten better at it. So I think that as coaches, it's our development too, right? So with athletes, I think that you have to figure out recharge methods individually for people, and I think that that's why I'm the world's biggest. Yeah, I'm the world's biggest burnout hypocrite, because part of it is my life as a baseball player. I traveled so much that I don't really. If I traveled to a beach, it would be a waste of me being on the beach because I feel like I should be doing something, so I have to find things. So the funny thing about it is I had a birthday come up in June, and I thought about what I was gonna do, and I just went to museums in New York City because I've been living in New Jersey my whole entire life and never gone to any of the stuff, right? I've been in New Jersey my whole life, never been to a Broadway show. Had never gone to like the Museum of Natural History, had never gone just like on a tour. So I said, I'm just gonna do that. And for me, that was something that helped me because I came back much more the recovery aspect was great, and I was recharged. And I always think like the best way I communicate this to my athletes is I think that athlete at the highest level is why I stopped playing. And this is when they ask me, it's like, why did you stop? For me, most athletes got I got hurt story. I didn't get hurt. That wasn't what ended my career. I think an athlete at the highest level is like an artist. It's how you express yourself. It's what is inside here comes out, and that it comes out through your athletic artistry. But when you cease to see the colors and you're just doing, going through the routine of every day, I think that you need to take a break and go away from it. And I have one of my really high-level basketball players, and she's great at it, but she's just grinding and grinding and playing a lot. And I'm always like, are you going to take a week off, 2 weeks off? And it's not, it's part of it's to give the body rest. But mentally, I think when you go away from it for a little while, and whatever it is you do, I'm not a beach person. Me and nature, we kind of got this agreement. I stay away from them, they stay away from me. Like if I go out into nature sequences, like wild animals don't even bother me because they know I have no business out there being whatever it is. They say God takes care of babies and fools, right? So I got a little bit of qualities of both. So I don't do that for recharge. I got to do something else. I like to learn. So if you put me in a learning space, I've like I can go to a museum. I'll stay there for hours. I remember going to Cooperstown baseball and just being there. I left to check parking and then went back in for another hour just because I wanted to like almost read every plaque or do this stuff. But back to what I was saying, it's like I think when you go away from it, you come back to it, you realize you can bring something to it. I think when you see, kind of like we talked about Michael Jordan, a lot of like his foray into baseball, I feel like a lot of that was because it's like I'm just looking for challenges. People made fun of the way that he would create these imaginary like feuds with people in his brain, but I think that's what kept him engaged. And then also, going away and doing something else, I now come back to it with a whole new look. I see different colors than what I saw, and now I have something really artistic to bring to it. For me, I think that was when I was done, when I realized that I wasn't, at my best in the game, or not so much at my best, but every day I wasn't bringing the best version of myself to it, is because it was really just a job at that point. I say this about presenting a lot when people say, oh, what are you going to present? At the point when I really don't have anything else to say, then I'm not going to do it anymore. Because am I standing up there just to be seen, or do I have really message for our industry that might help somebody get better at what they're doing? It's like great interviews like this where we get a chance to talk to, awesome people like you guys. It's like, if I have something to say, it's great. If you don't have something to say, it's like, what is the athlete if I really don't have the energy to bring my best to it every day? Do
you think some of that can be though, because maybe you've got to a stage where you've just actually, you probably did need to take a break and think and reflect, and then maybe you come back, like in your case where you do your 6 to 9, and maybe at some point it's like, yeah, I should take this forced break just to make sure I don't push myself beyond.
Yeah. So what I do now, and completely off cuff on the interview, is now I don't schedule anything on Sunday. So I used to, teach courses and do stuff on Sundays. Now I keep Sundays just, if there's football now, I love, the Cowboys. I watch football. I'll watch it all day long, or I'll do stuff. I'll work out on Sunday, but I won't do, really regimented stuff. I don't take calls on Sunday business-wise and things like that. I'll leave that now just to be that day. So we're not open on Sundays. I don't work Sundays. I leave that just more of a recharge day. If I need to read or do whatever, if I can go somewhere, I'll go those days. And that's like kind of like the mini thing. What I would do in the past is there was the Six Flags. So
the theme park.
Yeah, theme park. So this is one of those crazy things, right? So they used to have a season pass, and my brother we used to like to go. So we use that as a mini vacation, just go ride rides or do whatever, just to say, hey, I'm out, I did something, As an entrepreneur, this. You're almost never done. It's like you're sitting around and then you just told me something about the website. Now my brain's there for the rest of the time. And it's like, I got to stay up all night and do this website, so next time Matt goes and looks, he's not like, you didn't that part wasn't working. But that's the way it is. But when you get caught up in that, it's the same thing. So for me, I genuinely think that I'm at a point in my career where I genuinely don't have any person that walks in the door that I don't love. I think you get to a point in your career where you attract the type of people that are supposed to be in your place. If you stay in it long enough, as far as a trainer, I was in a place where I ran staffs of trainers for a big box gym company for a lot of years. And I always remember, as further I got down, I could have a client come and talk to me, and maybe 15 minutes into the conversation, or less than that, 5-10 minutes into the conversation, I could actually tell them who the trainer was without even knowing, because you could just match the energy, because if our energy doesn't match, it's going to be a hard sell. It's just not going to work for a long time. It's like one of those things, rapport. People used to say, oh, do you need to have instant rapport? No, you don't have instant rapport with everybody, but at some point you do gain it. Otherwise, they should probably, that's that coaching aspect, right? So at this point, I love what I do, so I'll stay there all night, which is not a good thing. So we all need, and I think that athletes who really love what they're doing, especially younger, high school, college, or, right now we got, you can click into a lot of things, like, they call it the Mamba mentality and things like that, where you're just working and working and working. But the machine, you do have to have a little bit of recharge there, because you don't want the brain foggy, because then you can't function at your best either. You can, do these many things, but at the end of the day, you do have to have that point where I think that you get to a point where the artistry can suffer. And that's not what you want from an athletic standpoint, if that makes any sense.
So, final question then, Michael. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be a memorable example of escaping your own personal limits?
Oh, wow. Escaping your limits. We could talk about pandemic. We could talk about flooding. We could talk about, when I think of escape your limits, that's a powerful term. I think that is great. And I love that you guys use that, escape your limits. It's one of those things we talked about that at the beginning. It's no matter how bad circumstances look, if we can unpack them and realize where we are, I think that escape your limits is like pushing the envelope when it doesn't seem like you can get and surmount the challenges that's in front of you. And I think that the interesting point about that is we think of that when the student is ready, teacher will appear. Also, people will appear for you that you didn't when you are putting this work in. For me, I never realized how many people recognize how much I put into what I do. And I think a great example of that was I got to a point in the middle of this flood type of recovery thing, right? And I'm not ashamed to say it. I got to a point where I walked in one day and I was like, I'm over this. I'm just over this. You know, you walk in, everything's a mess. You know, things look crazy. Everything's all over the place. And I had a friend drive down from Massachusetts, and he was sitting in the parking lot when I drove to like a Panera, and he said, I'm in the parking lot, you know, and now I got to go back. You know, I think you think of divine intervention, right?
When you was over it, you mean like you'd had enough?
I'm like, I'm over it. Like, everything's a mess. This is I don't have any idea where any of this is supposed to go. I got stuff that's in a pile. You got $20,000-$30,000 of equipment that's got to go in the trash. I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I'm over this. And then like I called somebody and they're like, just go take a break or whatever it is. And I'm just mentally. And then I had another friend who came to help, and he was doing just mopping and stuff like that. And I remember, and this is a little more worded than what it is, but I think that it really is a tell-all, because if somebody asked me what was that one moment when I realized that we could kind of do, he said to me, let's just get one room ready. And it changed completely everything, my mental, my mindset. That's all he said, and it sounds really simple, right? But then we were trying to get one room ready that we could use, and it changed, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, everything else fell into place, and then mentally, I got right back, it snapped me right back on track. So when I think of escaping your limits and stuff like that, I think of really, we never know what we have in us, right?
Right.
You know, we really don't. Like, if you told me I was going to go through 18 months of like COVID pandemic still going, and then I was going to have a flood, if you told me I was going to be able to get business going again, and you're still dealing with, you know, financial challenges and ramifications of all that, you know, I might have told you, hey, yeah, I don't want to do that, you know, but I think that at the end, if it means enough, the limits don't matter. So, and I think that when I think of escape your limits, that's like 7,000 answers in one. But hey, yeah, you'll get one you like.
Well, I'm glad you did, because there's probably a lot of people that will be grateful that you're around and the impact you're having on so many people's lives. So
I appreciate them. And the thing is, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't say I didn't do it by myself. So I could come and give you all the flowery quotes, but so many, to be honest, it's the one time in my life I ran out of ways to say thank you. I could say thank you again during, I'm going to say thank you again here. But I ran out of ways to say thank you to so many people. And I think it's gratifying for our industry, because I think that a lot of times we go about our business individually and we don't really know, you know, how much effect that we possibly have. You don't know how much effect that, you know, you founded something great, that you make great equipment. And we talked about that at the beginning, how much, you know, I just love what you do with the different ways that you make things unique. But you never know how many people, you know, come here or come to the places just because they just love the stuff that you guys make, and this is what you found it. And I think that that's great. And you know how many people, how many lives you touch. I think that it's something we can go through our daily 6 to 9s or whatever it is and not really come in contact with that. But so many people gave up their resources, energy, time to help somebody in New Jersey who, you know, was running a small athletic facility. And I think that, you know, I feel so fortunate to be part of it. So I really don't know any way to really say thank you, but I ran out of ways. So it'd be just another way to do it.
Michael, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.